the theme for the afternoon talk is the practice of S&M. Stillness and mindfulness are boring. Actually, it's on the A Way to Liberation is the theme. A couple of small things I'd like to mention. Yesterday evening, just in the doorway between the dining room and the kitchen, just as I was going to my room last night, there was one precious large green frog sitting there. So it emerged out of the forest somehow or other, found its way upstairs, and is sitting there. And it's actually beautiful green colour, and gently, mindfully of course, walked by, went to my room. In the night, I woke up for a leak, and came out of the room to go to the toilet. It is still sitting there in exactly the same position. It hadn't moved a centimetre. And the thought did arise that clearly frogs, in terms of stillness of posture and sitting, are much more evolved and developed than the human species. So then the thought which followed on from that is that perhaps talk to Jen a little bit, and perhaps next year, because I think we should give up on the human species, and perhaps Jen could invite, I'll give a retreat for frogs, and could come and sit. Anyway, and another thought that I had related, and after this observation of the precious stillness of the frog, it wasn't there in the morning time. Our beloved cook, Cozy, said to me that it had gone to have a shower and needing some water, and it went to the shower. Their own intelligence, these precious creatures, and in a kind of appreciation and recognition of the stillness of the posture and the deep reminder to all of us. So then another thought arose. So for donkey's years, actually it's just around 50 years now of being engaged in the practice of mindfulness and meditation and all the instructions since 1970, so we're at the tail end of 2019. So I thought, well, what practice could I explore with this? So the thought arose, the hands, these two hands, which are under the shawl, owing to the energy in the privilege of sharing and offering the teachings, it's usually not long before the hands are out, gesticulating with the hand. So I've made a vow, I can't promise to keep it, that the hands are going to endeavour to stay, like the frog, still under there. So if the hands do pop out, there, you can either walk out in disgust, you can have the view, my God, he hasn't got very far in 50 years of mindfulness practice if he can't keep his hands still there. And sometimes some people on YouTube might be watching this, and just to say to the good people on YouTube, if you feel really disillusioned, you'll probably find a decent teacher on YouTube who keeps her or his hands still. Go to them and more practice. All right. All right. Back to the theme of the talk. I'm not sure if I should mention this. Oh, why not? So, in reference to the S&M, whatever it is, there are some rather eccentric people in the Dharma world, and one doesn't realise it so much on retreats. it sometimes happens, in fact, at the end of the retreat, or if one's visiting the home. And two examples at the end of the retreat. One person in one retreat, she asked me if I could put on her stick from the laptop the talks, which are recorded talks and inquiry. So I said to her, look, if you don't mind, I'll wait a little bit. Beloved doula, she looks after all of this, and she will upload. So I really want to hear as soon as possible, rather late. I said, okay, bring me the stick. I put the stick into the laptop to copy and transfer over. And on the stick, it was full of erotic, tantric practices, step 1, step 2, with a nice visual picture on it. That's interesting. Letting go of all temptations to have a quick look. And a rather similar thing happened just a few months later. A young, handsome Swiss guy. Same thing. Oh, Christopher, could you, if I give you my stick, could you put it on my hard drive? I said, sure. I put it in. Stick. I don't know how many gigs. 32, 64 gigs. Of pornography, pictures, etc. And I handed it to him, and the thought did arise, it gives a whole new meaning to hard drive. And however, very bad joke. We will delete that. And I was staying, if I go on and get this off my chest there, I was staying in one person's home, and sometimes people like Jen and like Radha in previous years invited me to stay if I'm leaving or when I arrive. And when I arrived, she said, there's a lovely one-bedroom flat, and said to me, oh, Christopher, I'd really like you to stay in my room. I've got the sofa, I'll sleep on the sofa. I said, no, I'm used to sofas, I'll sleep. She said, no, she insisted, you sleep in my room there. So it's very kind, and I did. And on the bedside table there, with a book and a clock and everything, were a pair of handcuffs. I'd never seen handcuffs on the bedside table. And what was unusual about it, they were pink. It's very polite English. Well, I didn't say anything. The thought did arise, perhaps I could try them on for size, etc. But I thought if they got stuck and I couldn't unlock them, I might have some explanation to do under the passport control, etc. And another, this is true, another situation, staying with friends, a couple, and we had breakfast together, a very nice breakfast. And do you know what was on the centre of the breakfast table? A vibrator. A vibrator on the table. I've never seen a vibrator before in my life, and there was one on the centre of the table. Honestly, I could see the press button. And it was thick and huge. I don't know if you've ever been to London and seen Nelson's column. It was that. So again, I'm very polite. I didn't want to say anything. But I thought, we touched upon this last night, and any man seeing this thick, strong, tall vibrator, at the end of eating our muesli and our almond milk, we're going to have a terrible inferiority complex. These are dedicated, hardcore practitioners. So, new meanings to these things. Anyway, back to the thought. Enough. That might all have to be censored in due course. Oh dear. Such is life. So, with the exploration of the way of liberation, a path to liberation, there are a number of aspects to this, and if I may I'll take a little bit of the two commonly held views. Both are valid, are important, and perhaps a kind of third way to look at it altogether. So with the two common views. We hear, we are told, and it's a valuable metaphorical language, there is a path to waking up. There is a path to liberation. And that language of path and goal genuinely, for some people, works really well. It gives a sense of direction, moving forward, making progress, and sometimes on the path, of course, we might feel stuck, we might feel it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps back, but there's a sense of a path to be explored, that expressing itself in a variety of ways, one of which includes meditation and mindfulness and reflection as an aspect of the path. It is not the path, an aspect of it, and in that aspect of it, it's a contribution, but includes much more. To be mindful and alert to this, and sometimes, and partly because of the asana, that means the posture of the Buddha and the yogis, it has developed a kind of archetype, it has an iconic status, in which rather than just being a reminder and representational, it can easily infer the idea it is actually meditating and dedication to meditation, which is the way of enlightenment, which is the path. The more meditation we do, the greater depth and the greater the enlightenment. And this was the view of the yogis at the time, to withdraw from the everyday world, to engage in the asana of the sitting posture as the primary asana, and through that there could be the transcendence, liberation through the process of meditation there. The Buddha refuted the opinion. He said it's too narrow, it's a formation, posture, it's a way of conceiving, and broke away from that very classical, traditional view of a profound, deep experience, a mystical experience of consciousness in meditation is what one is working towards for liberation. He stepped out of that view, he opened up the whole exploration to a full engagement and exploration of life, and therefore not a confinement to a form. So no stone is to be left unturned. And that was a core message, sometimes reflected in the language of the Eightfold Path. Right view, or right understanding, right speech, right, it is a way of being which is fulfilling, nourishing and fulfillment. The word right is sama, means coming to, pardon me, coming together with a hand, which is with a practice and hands onto everything, so to speak, but with a practice which is fulfilling and nourishing, to bring life to a real sense that it's really fulfilling there. And so then that then included action, it included wise creative energy or effort, mindfulness, of course, meditation, the speech and communication and our intentions, so our lifestyle, all of that is an exploration for women and men of this earth to contribute to a really fulfilled way of being, and there's something liberating about it. So it was a shift from the classical sit, meditate until you have a deep experience. In the exploration there, sometimes it will seem, and it does seem, that freedom or liberation is far away. And therefore there can be a gap between where I am and where I wish to be. But again, teachings are really precious with regard to this as well. And it points out and it reminds us that we have moments, and perhaps plenty of moments, in which a sense of freedom, it might be small scale but significant, a sense of freedom can emerge for us in moments and in times which do need to be recognized. So that helps to reduce the gap between this great liberation with the extension of the sense of it to something more immediate and practical. To give the example here. A person, anyone, one of us, may be going through a rather difficult period. We really have to work through something. And sometimes, just to take a small sideways step for a moment, one of the participants on one of the retreats, she told me that she had been to a previous retreat, just I think it was just one before, and in that retreat, the teacher, Buddhist monk, offered teachings with regard to chanting. For some of us, and people like me, had not been my interest, and my two primary teachers, Ajahn Dhammadharo, he only allowed 20 minutes or half an hour of chanting once a week to please the lay people, because we're dependent upon them for the Dharma. And sometimes a comment was made, but with all the chanting, which is words of the Buddha, it's a little bit comparable to reading the instructions in a box of medicine over and over again and not applying them. The chant lovers should think about that for a moment or two. However, I mention this quite often as well, that as we know in the relationship to events, that which we might have a view about, there is always that which shows the limits of the view. So in this particular case, chanting, as I mentioned, is not my cup of tea. But then I had to sit up and take notice. So a good lady came on the retreat. She was genuinely in a very severe life crisis. The severe life crisis, I think she's about 39, 40 of that age, a bit older, and it was triggered firstly with a husband of quite a few years, so easily happens, falling in love with another woman, keeping it secret for quite some period of time, so that sense of betrayal was there with it, and he left her and went into the arms of the other woman. That was then followed by a demand from him that which is his right, he has a right to 50% of the property. So that, and because she couldn't afford to maintain it, that would mean she would have to sell this house, which she loved very, very dearly and lived in for years, and that doubled the pain and the anguish. And then the third thing that then went on top of that was that she lost her job. She had so much distress, she just couldn't handle going to work and was having a terrible breakdown. And it reached a point, she said to me, where she felt suicidal. That everything that she trusted in and believed in had broken away from her. And what was the point of carrying on? It was that level of despair. And then, she said, in the middle of the night, feeling absolutely desperate, terribly alone, and vulnerable and isolated, she remembered the chant of the monk and the chants that they did just for a few minutes every day. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami. He said she could barely remember what it even meant, but she just, in the bed, in the night, sitting there, sat up and started chanting and chanting and chanting and just kept on chanting. And she said, just doing that chant again and again and again, suddenly she realized, I can get through this. That rather than falling into the pit of despair and feeling desperate, the chanting and the vibration of the chanting, she said that after an hour or two she knew she could get through this, and at some point she'd be able to get on with her life. In other words, we never know the small things that we do in life and the benefit that might come. And when I heard that from her, I thought, wow, chanting has a quiet power to it. If it's helping somebody to get through such anxiety and losing the will to live, it has a power and a resonance to it. In the exploration of the mindfulness and the meditations and the exploration, with regard to freedom there, to use it as an example, the good lady there and others which are not so intense, there can be, and probably have experienced this for some periods and moments, that there's been some difficulty, agitation, anxiety, or too much thinking, or whatever it might be about there. And then it changes. And in that change, that, for the time being, twice, right? That for the time being, that it's no longer that issue, those thoughts, that anxiety, that pain, whatever, is no longer bothering one. And it's, in that time, it is a freedom. It's an important one. It's a freedom from. It was troubling me, it was agitating me, it was habitual. It's a freedom from. It is valuable to recollect and remember these small freedoms from, because it is the same freedom. It's related to the specific, to the particular, but it is a freedom. It can be that in the meditations there may be a calmness and a joy which is present. It begins to expand itself in the meditations, in one or more of the postures. One's really appreciating this. Sometimes it touches happiness and kindness and friendship for life and much, much more. One is really appreciating this. And in that freedom of which reveals itself as recognition of an expansiveness, it is a freedom from being contracted. It's a freedom from being contracted. And therefore, in the beneficial experiences, it's valuable to remember what it is freeing us up from, so that it's not so far away. The analogy which is used quite regularly in teaching and practicing, we may taste the dewdrop. It's at the moment, as somebody mentioned here to me, there's very little in the way of dewdrops in the morning time. One person said to me that she felt the dampness in the beginning of the day on the tent, but also could feel the ash as well at the same time, so mixing that together. There are times when there is the taste of the water, the dewdrop, the raindrop, the little glass of water, or whatever it might be. It's small, it's significant, but it has the same taste as a large, clean reservoir of water. It's the same taste. And therefore the taste of freedom, in this case, the freedom from, that freedom is the same taste as an ultimate freedom. There are many levels, shall we say, and depths which can be explored. And in this, the range and variety of the human experience can show itself in a variety of ways, and those variety of ways that it may show itself is in some expression inwardly, in which what is noticeable inwardly is the feeling life, the presence to the feeling, perhaps a picture or a story, perhaps a view, perhaps a calmness or quietness of the being. So we're in touch with the bare experience, in contact with that experience there. We may treasure and value these experiences, which may come spontaneous, may come in our meditations, which give nourishment to these receptive experiences, can come in the night or in the nature, with another, making love and reading a poem, with the art. Some experiences touch us well and deeply in the being, and we're very receptive to the experience. What can easily happen is, very understandably, that in the benefit of those sweet, precious experiences, mystical experiences, consciousness experiences, heart-opening experience, the wish, humanly enough, maybe the desire, more ego and self-invested, wants to repeat. I had this, it was so important, it was so precious, it changed my life, or it really gave me a sense of what the path and what the deep is. And then the self, which is the only thing that can do this, then identifies with that experience. So rather than just appreciating the experience, it wishes to repeat the history. So there is an impression, like self-image, which is an impression. There is an impression which is left. And it's a challenge for us in important experiences of life, painful or joyful, secular, religious, spiritual, consciousness, whatever the expression is, to be extraordinarily clear and mindful of the residue of the impression which is left when the experience is over. In other words, what do we do with this experience? In the best sense, we will remember it, in the best sense. And if the experience, the memory of that important experience keeps arising, which it can do. So you had an experience both joyful or difficult there, and you notice that in the days, weeks and months following on, it's still arising, it's still remembering it, still coming up there. It isn't a problem in itself that these old experiences, last week, last month, last decade, are arising. It could be, and this is to be clear about here, it's not because, oh, I must have the desire to have it again, or I must have the desire to have a different experience. It could be that the inner life, with the memory which is taking place, to use the Buddha's words here, one has not squeezed out the honey out of the experience, which, as the metaphor here, means there may be, in that experience, more insights, more understanding, more learning to take place out of that experience. And sometimes we want to move on too quickly from it, or we don't want to hold on to it, whatever. And we're wondering, well, why is it repeating itself? Why does it keep coming back to me there? It could be an indication inwardly that there's some opportunity here for some reflection. One might ask herself, has not been seen here? What is the voice saying? What understanding or learning or insights can come? It will require from us the usual calm and clarity, which is a great support for that. And it could be that out of that experience, something fresh, understanding comes, which we have not yet seen before. And when something is well understood, it then, so to speak, falls back, rests back into the past. It's integrated into the past. And many, many experiences which you and I have had from the past, we hardly ever remember. And we don't need to remember. But as I mentioned, some cases it keeps coming to us, or there is just a sense, there's still some honey here. There's still something to be seen here. I don't want to forget it or deny it or avoid it in any way. Let me go there. See what might emerge that can provide some extra insight for me. So that we are really using and employing the benefit of the past, mindfulness of the past, as much as we are about the present or the future. In the exploration of the field of experiences, as mentioned, they're arising, they stay for a while and pass away. Sometimes there is the recognition of these experiences. And one of the areas which one needs to be in the circles of exploration, a bit mindful and conscious of. And what I had in mind is not at all unusual in the religious, spiritual life, Dharma life, to make references to, shall we call it, the transcendent, something beyond the ordinary and beyond the everyday. So I regard it as a valid form of language. We have to tread very carefully with it. I do think it would be unfortunate to regard all these processes that we are engaged in as some kind of self-improvement program. Too much of that, it just ends up terribly narcissistic. It ends up more and more about me being a better person, or a nicer person, or a clearer person, or whatever, and that can lead to neglect. So sometimes in teachings and with teachers of different traditions, religious, spiritual, consciousness, Dharma, and so forth, a view, I've got in mind here, a view can come out. So what that means is a person may have, in that environment, let's call it a retreat, let's call it a course, let's call it a satsang, that means a meeting with a teacher or with a guru, a genuinely important experience, not to underestimate the importance of it there. Sometimes, because I hear it regularly and often enough, the teacher, some teachers, will say, that's it, you've got it. That may show itself in the very religious language, which is fine to use. Yes, you have found God. God is with you. God is giving support, and therefore the experience, in the religious language in this case, is then reconfirmed by the preacher or the speaker there, and the outcome of that person may really feel and sense, I have found God. I found something beyond my small, narrow, confined world, and the language which is comfortable for that person is G-O-D. For some people, and Indian people are quite comfortable with that kind of language. And of course, out of all of that, using the religious language for a moment, a person may really feel reborn. Come out of the old kind of birth and now they're reborn into being with God, into the community of those who do believe. And it's touching, and the references, the inspirations, the transformations which we hear of how it's changed people's life. A person's had health problems, a person's had addiction problems, a person's been unhappy, and then, as it sometimes said, God came into my life and saved you. My concern would always be not in the validity of the experience there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that having found God, it actually touches every area of one's life. It still can be that one supports the nation state to go to war. It still can be a belief in executions. It still can be God has given us everything, and therefore we can live, as some of the Christians will say, a life of abundance there, not understanding what the cost is to billions of others who do not have that kind of privilege. And in some cases, some of the missionaries are saying, this is why the West is so rich and you are so poor, because the West believed in God and in His Son, Jesus Christ, and you didn't, and that's why the West has abundance and you don't. And that message does go out, because I've heard it. So sometimes the view there may be the finding of God. He or she may have come out of a very difficult period in her or his life. It doesn't mean to say it's generated the kind of wisdom and insight which you and I would feel important about the relationship to the earth, to the ecosystem, and to each other. Similarly, and then there are others who, out of their experiences, in this case in finding God, it really is beautiful, the change and transformation. There is no holding to the old nationalism, the whole self-righteous view, and many, many other views. And just to give a small example of what I mean, in Bodh Gaya, it's the place of the Buddha's awakening 2,600 years ago. Used to give classes with the Hindi teacher to the youngsters, the poorest of the poor. Out of that, started a small school, room in the monastery, then 2 bamboo huts, 2 classes, and now a large school, largest in the village, with more than 600 children in it. I said I didn't want a Buddhist school, it would feel too narrow, too boxed in for me. But if we're going to have a school there, it's got to be interreligious, and therefore no one religion has the primacy, and it also has got to address a lot more than just academic study. And therefore music and the arts and poetry and theatre and yoga and mindfulness and meditation has to be included in the days, and this is what we do, and many people, lovely support from various friends here in Australia and elsewhere, and it enables the school to keep going. The head teacher is a Catholic nun, Sister Showa. And when we are transferring, this is a small example, money for the school, and in India, it's a little bit risky, especially in Bihar, transferring any money. There is always the danger that it goes down the black hole. So one sends $5,000. It costs around $100 per child per year for a full year's education. With every single cent goes to that school, there's no in between there. So we have the school, and the money can go out from the bank in the West, And the bank in India said, we haven't received it, not easy to prove, etc. And there's been a few biting up the fingernails because just recently we went nearly 3 months before we could pay the teachers' wages. 3 months. And it's remarkable how loving and kind and patient the teachers were, even though they couldn't receive any salary. And then, oh yes, we have the money, it's in the account. And at one point, we asked Sister Shobha, our head teacher, look, there's always these difficulties. Could we transfer it to your account? She said, I'm a Catholic nun. I don't have a bank account. I don't have anything. Just a few books and some change of clothes. And she said the salary, which we knew already, we do not give to her. The salary goes through to the main convent in Varanasi. And then they just distribute a little living money. And she lives in a tiny little room just outside the village with 2 or 3 other nuns. And day in, day out, year in, year out, she's doing this service as an act of love. No mention of Christianity. No mention of talking of Jesus or whatever, except in the concept of the other great faiths there. And it's the act of love, which is the act of service. And it's precious and wonderful how, to me, I would rather, I mean, I may not believe in beloved sister's God, not my cup of tea there, but I do know for myself there, I would much rather be in touch and know and enjoy the presence of someone whose faith is so strong, who has a sense of the salvation as a human being and gives so selflessly day in and day out there, to someone who, in comparison, is scientific, rationalistic, can't listen to anybody else, this is the reality of things, everybody else is deluded, etc. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Give me Sister Shobha anytime. Let the love do the talking there, and the acts of service which can and do emerge out of it. So that exploration, the freeing up of the human being, in different ways, touches upon great strength with us. And just to go back to the thread for a moment, I look at experiences. We come out of an experience, it might have been a bit of a dark night there, we come out of it, it is a freedom from. We can have experiences which not so much coming out of the dark, but more there is some sense of contraction, some sense of confinement or limitation in the structure. That structure drops away, fades away for us, and there is some opening and expansion. Aha, this is another freedom from. With the experiences as well, as important that they are, it's not the task nor the priority to have the regularity and the consistency of really important experiences. They genuinely are valuable. They genuinely are a great support. There is a recognition in these experiences of the expanse. Wow, what consciousness can experience? Whole range and variety of them. It's extraordinary what we can experience. But the teachings are not to land upon and achieve one special experience, one major, mind-blowing, ultimate enlightenment. Again, it's often been said over the many centuries of women and men exploring experiences. It's not the experience. Because the experience, though important, is subject to arising. It is subject to staying for a period, and it is subject to passing. In the arising and staying and passing of the field of human experiences, plenty of insights can come. So when those experiences are rather deep and important for us, it's a freedom from the other experiences. And we can recognize that. But what is more important than the experience, than the feeling, than the presentation in consciousness, is what is it showing? What is the insight? What is the revelation? What is that which is profound and deep? So the experience itself, beautiful and wonderful, and we feel blessed with certain experiences. It, as mentioned, will fade away, but something in the deep can come through the experience. It kind of informs, it reveals something which has a staying power to it. It's genuinely beneficial, whether it's felt or not doesn't matter, in the course of life. And our interest is to be receptive to what is deep and see, to use the metaphorical language, what the voice of the deep is informing us. If you like religious language, what God is telling us. What is being revealed to us. And when something precious and beautiful and significant is revealed to us, we know it not because of the strength of the event there, but by its outcome. We know ourselves by the response to the deep. And it's keeping that. And certainly in listening to plenty of all of you over the days and hearing really precious and important accounts of your experiences with life, and in those, some of those experiences you remember and you know, in a real sense of being kind of life-changing. There was a direction or a way or a pattern or whatever it might be, and then there was a shift, and that shift brought about a new direction, a fresh opening, and one, as it were, listened to the voice that change was necessary, or change has coming about, and you've trusted in that voice, that sense, even though others may think you're lost or confused or you're quite sure about this, etc. But one has trusted in it, and one has a sense in the passage of time, wow, this really freed me up. This really opened up my life. And these movements of the opening up of the life and the freeing up of the life, these teachings are about that. This is what the liberation teachings are about. That it's not a withdrawal, it's not detaching ourselves from, but an authentic and deep exploration which really expands and opens up the life. And there's no end to that potential. It would be a pity if we think, oh, I understand, I've got it. The it, which one has got, will be a block. The it will end up as a contraction. And sometimes in our circles, there are those who imagine, think or believe, I got it. The person will say, oh yes, I'm not the body. Yes, I'm not the mind. I'm not the emotions. I am consciousness. I have found my true self. Maybe deep and important, but it would be a pity, I would say, to kind of rest there in the I got it mode of thinking there. Because the identification with that may block the opportunity for tremendous discoveries which are not being perceived. by any of us at that time. So when we talk about expanse and exploration, let's not get it. Let's not think I got it. Let's not restrict ourselves to a word or a phrase or a view. Life is immensely expansive, immensely open, extraordinary to participate in. Let's not have any confinement. Let's have our quiet. May we not set limits to our potential. May we recognize our capacity for endless exploration. May we live with love and liberation. Thank you for listening. And this time some walking time or standing, and then